They're taking over games and nobody stands a chance. Let me guess, it's about China.
I need you guys to make sure that I'm not losing my mind, that I'm not seeing things, because from my perspective, it looks like all the games the players are the most excited for, the ones that they're enjoying the most, the ones that they're talking about the most, the games that have been the most successful outside of a couple of outliers. I'm not saying that it's all of them, but they're all coming from the East. Elden Ring, Pal World, Tears of the Kingdom, Armored Core 6, Monster Hunter, Resident Evil, Black Myth Wukong, Space Marine 2, Marvel Rivals, Final Fantasy, and I already know that I'm going to enjoy Stellar Blade once it releases.
Let me think. Can I think of any others? I probably could. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot, especially the ones that are coming out.
PC.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not saying that all Eastern games are great and all Western games are bad. No, there's definitely there's a handful of good games in the West. Believe me, I put 400 hours into Baldur's Gate 3. But with that said, the list is very short on the Western side of things. Yeah. And I think this is something that the vast majority of the industry doesn't want to discuss, especially games media, because, well, it means that they're losing relevance.
Of course.
Western games are losing relevance.
This is the reason. You're absolutely right. Media doesn't want to acknowledge that Chinese game studios and overseas game studios in general are gaining momentum and catching up in the market, because that diminishes their cultural relevance. Because their cultural relevance is only important inside of the scope of that individual culture.
Extension, Western media then loses its relevance as well. There's been a cultural shift over the years where players are not being prioritized, but these Eastern studios are prioritizing those audiences. And as a result, because that cultural shift doesn't happen over there, well, they're taking advantage of a situation and they are skyrocketing in popularity. They're gaining more players, they're gaining more influence, and more importantly, they're gaining more money, which makes them a major threat to the rest of the industry.
There's also another component, too, about this, is that a lot of places overseas have much lower development costs because different costs over there are much lower. Like, for example, Black Myth Wukong cost under $100 million to make, much under $100 million to make. If that same game was made here in America, it probably would have doubled that number.
About heading towards a world that has a heck of a lot more Black Myths and Marvel Rivals and a lot less Dragon Age the Veilguard and Concords. That's not good for a lot of people in this industry.
And I actually even think that this problem isn't about the West as a macro group. I think it's actually about America. It's American games are the ones that are garbage. Because Baldur's Gate 3, Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, those games were great and they were Western games. It's American brain rot.
I'll tell you that right now because, well, as these
Ubisoft,
Eastern studios continue to be successful, as they're able to produce way more games than a lot of these Western studios because of the financial position many of them are in, well, their investors are going to turn around and ask them, why aren't you doing that?
Yeah.
They're going to say, well, we can't. But before we get into that, Monster Hunter Wilds is right around the corner, and with it is coming some of the craziest PC specs I've ever seen required. So you guys could use today's sponsor, Starforge. I've been loving my new PC from Starforge Systems. It's incredibly quiet, sleek, and lightning fast. It's a way better build than I could do myself, and they've got something for everyone.
By the way, if you want to buy one of the 1590 PCs, you have to be there like the moment, because apparently they're still selling out super fucking fast.
Ryzen PCs, which are great for your everyday gamer, much more affordable and just great for a first-time user or even experienced players. You can kick it up a notch. Go into their Navigator series. They're packed with next-gen components, giving you some truly high-end performance. But if you're a content creator or an enthusiast like me, well, their Voyager series has everything that you're going to need. Starforge has a ton of incredible customization options with PCs inspired by popular games like Terraria and old-school RuneScape, anime like FreeRen, and even their own original designs. And if you really want to customize, they got limited run designs, plate lights, desk mats, and even posters to match your setup.
That's
Every
pretty
PC
crazy,
is hand-built in Austin with premium quality and attention to detail, plus a 2-year parts and labor warranty. Starforge Systems, premium quality, white glove service, and all of it at an accessible price point. Follow the link in the pinned comment or the description below and check out Starforge Systems and find the PC of your dreams. There is a clear divide.
So true. Absolute. 100%. Completely agree.
Between games made in the East and those made in the West. And I found myself enjoying more Eastern games more and more. And I know that I'm not alone. You don't have to look that hard to see the difference. Eastern games are thriving while Western titles are drowning in complaints, controversy.
The worst thing about Western games and American games is the dialogue in the games. The dialogue is where the real weakness shines through. The gameplay can sometimes be comparable, but the dialogue is just painful.
Creative stagnation. These studios and publishers get it. Culturally, they get it. They understand what players want, and they're delivering it without compromise. I boot up Monster Hunter, Black Myth Wukong.
I think it really says a lot if you have an Eastern developer that somehow understands American players better than American developers do, right? I mean, this is pretty fucking sad. It's HR dialogue? Yes, it is.
Fantasy 16, and it feels like peak is the only thing that they care about. They want you to experience something that is unforgettable. They want you to be blown away by the scale, spectacle, and raw excitement. I'm tracking down monsters, and I'm fighting them and crafting armor out of their bones.
Yeah, so basically Monster Hunter is about monsters and hunting them, and it's not some sort of veiled critique on climate change or some sort of government, opinion or anything like that. It's just simply a very good video game that's about monsters. I know, guys, I know.
Developers painstakingly research ecology to make sure that they can create a realistic ecosystem that feels alive, while at the exact same time, they're not making that their only priority. They're also delivering stylized combat that you'd only find in anime. I'm walking through China's cultural history, experiencing one of the oldest stories.
Well, you'd also find it in fucking Yakuza. That game was an anime. It was basically an anime game. It was insane.
Ever told, and fighting literal gods in Black Myth Wukong. I'm experiencing political upheaval and a world-ending crisis in Final Fantasy 16, but every moment builds to something bigger. The stakes, the music, the sheer unrelenting spectacle. I go from trying to find the truth to fighting a dragon in space that is about to unleash a laser to destroy the world. Then we look at games like Ninja Gaiden, Resident Evil, Stellar Blade, an entire industry of gacha juggernauts unapologetically delivering cool, badass, and attractive characters.
It's because these games know what their target audience is. Western games, basically having a target audience is bad if your target audience is young men. And if you're making a game like this, your target audience will be young men. And young men want chicks with big tits, big swords, and cool shit, and they don't want to be patronized by some Karen. And they don't want dialogue that sounds like HR is in the room. Young guys don't like that. They've never liked that, and they never will like that. You're not going to psyop them into liking that. It's just not going to sell, just like it hasn't.
Studios are not afraid to give players what they want. Whether it's over-the-top action, ultra-stylized designs, or characters that are as powerful as they are attractive. Western games, well, they've been moving in the opposite direction. The androgynous, desaturated...
Well, the reality is, here's the thing. A lot of people play video games to get away from people like this in real life. So when you put people like this, these annoying, disagreeable, obnoxious, just rude people in video games... Well, it's like I'm trying to get away from this, and now they're in the game too. Why would I want to play the game?
Rated corporate safe designs that plague Western titles. Nobody's asking for that. Certainly not the players. Certainly not women. I see countless 2B cosplayers, but I haven't seen a single person willingly dressing up as Abby from The Last of Us Part 2. So I guess we might see some Concord cosplays this year. But it's not just the aesthetics. It's
maybe for Halloween. The skeletons.
Eastern studios are focusing on the player experience. It seems like the only thing they actually care about. They're not obsessing over realistic sweat physics in a first-person shooter. They're making sure that the controls feel incredible. They're not waiting.
Yes. The physics of the water. Like how things happen in the water. Like, oh, well, what do the birds do? Like, yeah, you can focus on that. That's great if you want to do it. Like what we were talking about with Skyrim and Avowed. But if your game doesn't play well, that's priority number one. And you can't even get past that.
Wasting time on irrelevant tech demos, they're refining gameplay mechanics to perfection. They aren't ballooning their budgets to insane proportions for the most useless things. They aren't trying to be Hollywood. They're trying to be video games. I've been replaying Armored Core 6, and it's one of the most visually stunning games that I've played. But here's the thing. It's not chasing photorealism. It's designed in a way that tricks you to feel like it is. You're so immersed in the gameplay, so locked into the experience that you don't care about environmental destruction or ray trace reflections because the game is so damn good that you don't...
Well, I'll give people a little bit of a heads up. Nobody ever cared about environmental destruction, or actually people do like that, or like ray tracing or anything like that. This is all something that this doesn't sell a game. At the bottom line, it does not sell a game. It's nice if the game has it, but it will not sell the game.
Need those things. Then I go back to Western AAA games, and what do I get? A checklist simulator, or a tutorial that assumes that I've never touched a controller before, a protagonist that will not shut up, constantly telling me what to think and what to feel, a game world that exists only to make a point, not to be explored. And their obsession with open world bloat, because why make a game feel big when you can make it look big? Western developers want to force you through a message. Eastern developers want you to lose yourself in the experience. They aren't holding your hands.
I think that's a really good point that he brings up too, is that there is a level of escapism that Western video games, and especially American video games, don't want you to have. And I feel like a lot of Western video games, it's kind of like, you know what a good example of this is that, were you guys ever in like, you know, AP or pre-AP English class in like high school? And you would have to hear about everything, how everything was a metaphor for like slavery or something like that. And like at a certain point, you just ask yourself, is this actually what the author intended? Or is this just what this dumb bitch keeps saying because she wants to have a job? I think that's where we're at. It was annoying as fuck. Yeah, it's so fucking annoying. It's like, no, not everything is a fucking metaphor. Like sometimes people are just talking about this in a general sense.
Painfully self-important narrative filled with stiff, corporate-safe writing. They're letting you engage with a world that feels alive. Eastern games are just built different.
Or ReFantazio? Well, the reason why Metaphor ReFantazio is good is because they allow Luis Guilloburn to be a force to be reckoned with. Like, he is honorable. He never lies. He's strong. He's competent. Now, he might be evil, but it's not like he's it's not like he's an inferior person in a lot of ways, if that makes sense, right? Like, they're not afraid to give villains that encapsulate and incorporate like, these villains play the role that real life villains in the past have played historically, but they're not afraid to give those villains positive attributes. And I think that with American games, a lot of these games are afraid to give villains positive attributes because they're worried that people might like the villains. And Luis was fucking cool. He was so fucking cool. He was awesome. It's the same as like that Senator Armstrong guy in, what do you call it? A Metal Gear Rising Revengeance. That's it. People love Thanos. Yeah, it's such a stupid perspective to have, but again, it's a perspective that's informed by, 12th grade AP English, theater students that are trying to write a story so they can indirectly own Donald Trump. That's it. Or Elon Musk. Or actually, why not both?
That's why they are dominating, and that's why they're going to continue to dominate. It's going to make it harder and harder for a lot of these Western studios to be able to stay relevant. Now, Japanese games being popular isn't anything new. In many ways, Japan is what built the foundation of modern gaming. If it wasn't for Nintendo dragging the industry out of the gutter in 1983, well, we probably wouldn't even be having this conversation. But we're not just talking about Japan. It's China, it's Korea, and beyond. Apparently, nobody took notice that 2024 featured an entire wave of Eastern studios stepping into the AAA space, shaking up the industry, and forcing Western studios to confront the reality that they're not the only game in town anymore. And I noticed this shift when I saw historically mobile studios start to step up into the AAA premium game space.
I love this, by the way. I think this is fucking hilarious. That, like, not only... So this is, Grand Blue Fantasy Relink. And you have this game... And these people that made this shitty bullshit gacha game just decided, hey, you know what? What if we just made a really good game? And you know what they did? They made a really good game. That's it.
Grand Blue Fantasy Relink. This was a game by Cygames, a studio known for gacha games like Grand Blue Fantasy and Shadowverse. Why would they suddenly decide to make a AAA, full production, full-priced game unless they knew it was a smart investment, unless they saw an area of opportunity? Turns out they did, because Grand Blue Fantasy Relink sold 1 million copies in just 11 days, and it has still continued to sell, and the players loved it. Then it happened again with Stellar Blade. Shift Up, another gacha.
It was also very well liked by the player base. A lot of people that played it enjoyed the game.
a studio jumped into AAA gaming, and the result, another massive success.
Wow.
A game that sold over 1 million copies.
Just
it's likely to outsell its PlayStation numbers entirely once it actually launches on PC.
I have a feeling Stellar Blade will have a lot more sales on PC. I think we all know why.
Otters are going to have a field day with this one. Then a first-time Chinese studio delivers a AAA cultural masterpiece in Black Myth: Wukong, a game that shattered Steam's concurrent player records and sold 20 million copies in 1 month. It was bold, visually stunning.
Think about that, selling 20 million copies in 1 month, and it didn't win Game of the Year. Like, it's actually... I view this as, like... This was outrageous that happened. The big, for political reasons, I still believe this. You guys can call me Conspiracy Andy all you want. I think that Black Myth: Wukong undeniably deserved Game of the Year, and the only reason why it didn't win was for political reasons. I straight up believe that. I actually do. I'm not sorry.
Rooted in mythology, blending diverse storytelling techniques and cinematic cutscenes, had exhilarating combat that just kept you hooked. Its tight linear progression and light yet meaningful customization stripped away any necessary bloat. It just offered a pure, content-rich experience that pulled you in and refused to let you go. And who could forget Pal World, allegedly made for under $7 million, reaching 25 million players with 15 million copies sold on Steam. A game that crystallizes just about everything players have been asking for, what they've wanted, the freedom that they've wanted. Finally, we saw the release of Marvel Rivals.
That's another great example, is that Pal World, like, even now, like, if I pull up Pal World at this very moment, it has 60,000 people online in its last peak. And the last update they had was, like, months ago. Even now. It's insane. It's also on Game Pass? Yeah, but those numbers aren't being included on Game Pass. So the numbers are even more impressive, I would say.
Farming onto the scene with stylized characters, great gameplay, killer performance, non-intrusive monetization, and overall just a fun experience for players that helped the game reach over 600,000 concurrent players on Steam with over 20 million downloads across all platforms.
Now, Marvel Rivals, what they need to do, hear me out on this. What if they had like a mode in the game where instead of fighting against like other, let's say like other heroes in Marvel, what if you fought against like monsters and it was like a dungeon or like a PvE experience, right? I feel like that would be a really, really cool idea. If they added PvE content to Marvel Rivals, imagine that. Maybe they gave like, you know, certain characters like whole talent trees and everything. Wow. I feel like they could do it. It's a great idea.
The success of these games, the shift is undeniable, and it's not slowing down. 2025 is already shaping up to be another massive year for Eastern developers. Monster Hunter Wilds is going to explode, potentially breaking over.
I think that the majority of this game, like, I would say, like, I mean, Japan has been dominant in the video game industry ever since the video game industry has existed in America, basically. But the big difference here is that you're seeing Korean developers actually bring in... Because, like, Korean developers have always existed in the American market, but they've been pretty much always relegated to mobile and pay-to-win, like, gacha-style MMO games. And I think that now they're developing games that are much larger in scope. Besides that, I think that Kazan First Berserker is one example of that. But the big one, honestly, the 80% here is China. China are the ones that are building and making the really big games now. And the other big reason for it, I'm going to be honest, you want to talk about real soft power? How about having everybody in the fucking world think that your mythology is one of the best games that came out this year? That's real soft power, not a transsexual Sesame Street play in Iraq. That's real soft power.
1 million concurrent players on Steam. I could easily see it. I mean, Monster Hunter World, quintupled engagement across the entire franchise, so there's no telling.
We take all of the money from USAID, we give it to Rockstar to make a game of the 12 Trials of Hercules. That's right. That's right. That would be insane.
How far this new entry can go. Players are already excited for Phantom Blade Zero, Wu Chang Fallen Feathers, Light of Motrium, and Tides of Annihilation, all made by Chinese studios stepping up to steal the show. And after seeing all these successes and the engagement that I'm seeing from the players, how excited people are for some of these games that are coming out, I think that Eastern studios have figured out what Western gaming has refused to accept. That the layoffs, the cancellations, the flops aren't because gaming is dying. Players aren't leaving games, they're leaving Western games. Yep. They're seeing an industry that's at war with its own audience. They see the greed, the
That's a really good way of putting it. Yeah, at war with its own audience. That's exactly what it is. Yep. When did propaganda get changed to soft power? It never did. It's just a new definition.
Arrogance and the creative bankruptcy, and they're
Monster
stepping in
fucking explode.
I'll take what Western studios have abandoned. And I think that the industry is threatened by this.
Always
and they
has
should
been.
be, to be honest with you. I mean, look at the way that games media reacted to some of these releases. Because while Stellar Blade reviewed relatively well, it wasn't without controversy. Heck, they actually had to write an article to tell everybody, why is Stellar Blade so controversial? Are attractive characters unrealistic?
They are for women in America.
Female beauty standards in gaming need to evolve. I'm sorry, but saying that beauty standards need to evolve is like saying that gravity needs to be more inclusive.
Well, to be fair, with a lot of the people saying beauty standards need to evolve, they also probably also have a problem with gravity. If you know what I mean.
Try to change reality all you want, but people will always be drawn to what they find appealing.
Yeah.
That's it. And then came Black Myth Wukong, and that's what they absolutely lost it. Developers not responding to the accusations that they made up, not responding to the...
What about this? Like, well, we made up a bunch of stuff about you. Aren't you going to address this and come to the table and you know, play the game that we've created that you lose in? Like, why aren't you playing our game that you lose in? Wait a minute, but I set the chessboard up so I can checkmate you. Why don't you want to play the game? You can't just ignore us. No, you can't sell 20 million copies. What are you doing?
Their headquarters being vandalized because of the accusations they made, not answering questions about inclusivity in a game about a monkey. That's when it became painfully clear. The industry is...
the worst thing that was painfully clear about that is the self-report of all the developers saying that all the reviewers saying that there were no women in the game. All you did is self-report that you didn't even finish the game. You played through the first chapter or two. You never finished the game because you'd know that the entire fourth chapter is all about women. It's not even true.
Terrified of these rising Korean and Chinese studios because they can't control them, so they attack them instead. The only controversy surrounding these games was fabricated by media outlets desperately trying to reinforce their own narrative and their own worldviews. And it became laughably obvious once reviews started rolling in for Black Myth Wukong, with multiple critics slamming the game for a lack of female characters and diversity, not realizing...
Dude, bro, like, if you are a reviewer, you're doing that. Like, again, bro, like, I don't know, like, CERN or, like, NASA needs to hire these people because somehow these games journalists have managed to take their credibility and divide it by zero. Physically impossible. They've broken the limits.
I think that women played a key role Act 3 and beyond.
Yeah.
I brought this up before. I think I showed it off in one of my last videos, but it still blows my mind that Inverse would straight up call anyone who bought the game Chinese nationalists and anti-woke.
Wait, what? Black Myth Wukong isn't even good, but that won't stop Chinese nationalist and anti-woke sales? It isn't even good. Also, like, nowhere in the game did it say China was good. The only thing that they said at all that was a realistic, like, relevance is that apparently there was that statue, like the guy, the headless guy with that would do the thing in chapter 2. Apparently that statue is real. And apparently like Britain or somebody like that had the head of the statue, and they just semi-recently gave it back to China. So the Rat King running around with the fucking head, And to be fair, they were being rats. That's not their fucking head. That's not their statue. They should have given it back, and they did. That's good. It was amazing.
In. Look how detached from reality media has become.
Yes.
Fun action game, no political messaging, monkey with the big stick go bonk. Yeah, that's fascist. This is about an industry that is panicking. Western publishers and media have spent the last decade trying to dictate what players should want, and now it's backfiring. Eastern studios aren't arguing with their audience. They're just giving them what they want. Hell, I just saw that Marvel Rivals had planned to do mid-season rank resets. The players said no, and Marvel Rivals just said, oh, okay, that's fine. I think that's what a lot of the industry has gotten away from, not what games should be about.
Usually when they do a rank reset, for me, it doesn't really matter.
Not what games should be, but who games are for.
Yeah.
Eastern studios, pretty much across the board, are just doing a better job at recognizing what players want and are giving it to them. That's what you need to do to succeed. A lot of Western developers and media are just so caught up.
You just look at what people want, and then you give them the thing that they want. I know. Like, how could... like, imagine your job is that easy, and you just keep messing it up. How do you keep messing that up? I feel like it's pretty easy, isn't it?
In today's events and politics that they're forgetting that players are playing games to escape from that. Eastern games are thriving because they're not chasing trends or politics. They're chasing timeless experiences. They're crafting worlds that players want to revisit years from now, not just ones that are going to give you Twitter engagement for a few weeks before fading into irrelevance.
Yeah.
Just the topical nature of Western games is already a death sentence. I was thinking about this the other day, and I'm like, I played Borderlands 3 a few years ago, and the entire time I was playing it, I was like, dude, nobody's going to remember any of these pop culture references, any of these cringe jokes or anything like that, because it was just so modern day. It was so today for that game when it released. And I'm like, people aren't going to...
You know who makes a lot of these like inside jokes and everything? And like some of it is okay because it's kind of like, it's a parody of itself, like Deadpool. But do you know who does it? Fat, boring, lame millennials with Funko Pops on antidepressants. That's who it is. That is your enemy.
Remember this stuff. I was thinking about Dragon Age the Veilguard. Do you think 20 years from now somebody's going to pick up that game and go, what's this about? What are they even talking about in this? Eastern studios have just been so much more...
That's actually a good question. Yeah, what is non-binary going to look like in 20 years? Yeah, I wonder, because, yeah, that's crazy to think about it. Oh, man. Wow.
More consistent. They don't have any of that extra bullshit that's in there. We just see the normal complaints from them. I think that's another thing to think about as well. When you think about some of these Eastern studios, the vast majority of controversy that surrounds them is the normal stuff. Day one performance, patches, expansion content, microtransactions. I want to go back to those days, man. I'm getting sick and tired of talking about some of these issues with some of these Western games. You don't see their developers, their mentally ill developers going on Twitter and having a meltdown to keep their politics and their opinions out of their games and out of the public eye, and they just focus on doing their job.
Yeah, they just do their job. It's the same as like, you know, I look at like one of these Western game, like this is probably a bad take, but that's my job here, right? Every time that I go and I look at a Western game development studio and it looks like a Chuck E. Cheese, and then I go and I look at like the From Software studio or the Square Enix studio, and it's a bunch of people sitting in their cubicles working, I start to notice a pattern. I do. I'm just saying I notice a pattern.
Games do the talking instead. And oh man, their games are
Business
talking.
Unit 3.
You know, it's been a while since I've done a review. I need to do a review. I've been playing Armored Core 6 again, and it is insane how good that game is. It's just...
The only thing that's bad about Armored Core 6 is that the DLC for it hasn't come out yet.
It's absurd how good that game is and how little spotlight it got. The players that loved it...
I played the whole thing.
They loved it. The players that don't haven't played it yet.
Well, it's a mech game, right? The problem is, like, mech stuff was so big in the 90s and the 2000s, and, like, he remembers this, right? Like, back whenever we were kids, it was so big, But then like they started trying to make mech games in like the GameCube and like a 360 era. They tried making them like super realistic, and it ended up not being fun. And like now we're going back to mech games being massive with things like Mecha Break. Like we had Mecha Break earlier. This came out just like a few days ago. Actually today. Let me see if I can find it and pull it up again. Mecha Break, and then this is the demo. Today it peaked at 300,000 players for the demo for the game. Fucking insane. Absolutely fucking insane. So mech games are coming back.
So beautiful, but they don't do anything like trying to make sure that I can see my reflection in the visor of an enemy mech or anything like that. Yeah. They don't waste a bunch of time and money and resources on all these weird fidelity things that just aren't necessary for a game like that. They just make it tight controls, incredible gameplay, really good story. Heck, it's one of the best stories that I've experienced in a game over the last few years. That's got a couple outliers, of course. There's some really good ones that are out there. Yeah. But 90% of it was from text. Like it was just a pop-up on screen and a voice.
Well, that doesn't say a lot. I mean, fuck, like most of those text-based adventure games have a better story than any AAA American game, I'll tell you that. And like the big difference to me, like, you know what the real shocker to me was with Yakuza. I was playing that Yakuza pirate game, and I was like, wow, this is actually a complex storyline, and it's not super black and white, and it's interesting. And the characters are complex. And then I've been playing Avowed as well. And it's just sad. It's really just sad.
That was it. No cutscenes or anything like that. It wasn't necessary. They didn't need that because they just focused on it being pure gameplay. And man, is it so...
Yeah, no, the other game like that is Mouthwashing. Like I remember because like I was even talking to Emmy about this. Like she loved that game, and it's like one of the things that I would say really defines whether a game is good or not is how much you think about the game after you play it. And like that's the kind of game that like you think about long term because of how complex and how good it was. And like that's really the way I see it. What's your excuse for Yakuza having a low player base? I don't know. I don't really have an excuse. Like, I mean, I don't know. Maybe it just didn't resonate with a lot of people. Like, Armored Core 6 didn't have a crazy high player base either, honestly. Yeah, it didn't. That doesn't make the game bad. Like, so the thing is that, and it's disappointing, though. Like, you bring up a good point, don't you? Because, like, I would love it if Armored Core 6 peaked at 1 million players. Because if it did, we'd probably already have Armored Core 7. And we'd have, you know, like Battle Core and, you know, Mech Core and all of these other games. Now, we did get Mecha Break, which is nice, but I want more of them.
Good. That's what players want. That's what these Eastern studios have been delivering. No nonsense, all gameplay. Give the players what they need.
Absolutely.
That's it. That's why they've been succeeding, and that's why some of these Western games have been failing. Because, you know, I think they got comfortable. They had a stranglehold on the industry. They had more money.
It's not that they're comfortable. It's that they're insulated. They're insulated by by the media that they work hand in hand with in order to push narratives that are basically player unfriendly. That's the difference.
Developers, more resources, more experience. But now you have some of these studios that are popping up in some of these other countries that aren't under their influence. A lot of them are really inexperienced. But they got the people to be able to do it, and they're learning pretty quick. Developer tools, the barrier to entry to make a video game is way lower than it's ever been before, and that's a major threat for some of these companies.
That's why so many games
companies that forgot how to treat us like customers. And it makes me... I was wondering why Black Myth Wukong and Stellar Blade had this weird, like, anti-Asian, anti-Chinese rhetoric among games media in a lot of different circles. I mean, like, they had the one person that said, you know, if you bought the game or the people that made the game successful were Chinese nationalists and the anti-woke. The reason why they say that is because it's meant to sound evil.
It's you're the bad guy. Now you're the bad guy. And also, like, I am an appreciator of Chinese culture. I think it's incredible. It's one of the oldest cultures in the entire world. Like, America's 250 years old. China's 3,000 years old. That's incredible. That's amazing. Like, you can appreciate Chinese culture and Chinese mythology without actively subscribing to everything that the current government thinks. Of course.
It's meant to be disparaging. These countries have a culture that's counter to theirs. They can't let that stand. But these studios aren't just a threat because they counter their culture. They're not just a threat because of the fact that, well, their games are delivering what players want. They're a threat because they have something that the rest of the industry is going to have a real hard time with. They can make games far cheaper and far faster than anybody else in the entire industry. That's going to be a big problem because as they create more games and they overwhelm the rest of the industry, well, the rest of the industry is not going to be competing with them. They're going to be swallowed by them.
That's what's going to happen with AI too. That's why Trump was right. Like I was like, because people are mad that Trump like got rid of like some of the ethical concerns with AI. The fact is that like if the other countries aren't doing this and you're doing it, you're going to lose. That's it. You just lose. That's all there is to it. Like I mean, like you can lose with dignity, but usually after you lose, you don't keep a lot of dignity, especially with something that big.
The rise of Eastern studios isn't just a trend, it's a foundational shift in the industry. What we're seeing right now isn't just one or two breakout hits, it's an entire new wave of studios that's stepping out onto the global stage. And the scary part is, for Western developers, they're only going to get better. Most of these companies are still in their infancy, yet they're already disrupting the market. Game Science, as an example, the developers of Black Myth Wukong, had never made a AAA game before, yet they produced a title that sold 20 million copies for only $43 million. Given the average salaries of Shift Up employees.
This is like that fucking thing in Iron Man 1. It's like Tony Stark built this in a cave. And you can't build this with $1 billion. What are you doing? If Henry Ford asked for consumers what they wanted, they would have asked for faster horses. Now, what do you think should happen to a person that spams in chat like this? What do you think should happen? And I want you to know that I saw your message previously. I didn't read it. The reason why I'm pulling you up is because you're spamming. It's not like spamming worked. I saw your message the first and the third and the fourth time too. Do you have any last words before you're banished into the Shadow Realm? Awesome. Sure is. 07. See ya.
Stellar Blade cost an estimate between $40 to $50 million. Now imagine what these studios can do once they gain some more experience, more funding, and a deeper understanding of the global market. Unlike many of these Western AAA studios, which have been floundering despite decades of experience, these new developers aren't starting with bad habits. They're building up from a lean, focused, and player-driven approach. One of the biggest advantages for a lot of these Eastern studios is just cost efficiency. The Western gaming industry is drowning in ballooning development costs, with AAA games exceeding $200 to $500 million budgets. We're seeing longer development cycles.
I actually think that a lot of these studios, like I've had the mindset that every single organization or group of people that I've ever been a part of, and like I've ever intimately understood like the nature of their production, I've learned that most of the people that are involved are retarded. And usually a lot of money is wasted by or in service of those retarded people. Like most systems are garbage. Most of them can be optimized. And the issue also is that, you know, you have the bureaucratic entropy where you need managers to manage the managing managers. And this is like obviously multiplied when you have HR and other types of, identity groups that are trying to make the company pay to keep them effectively on corporate welfare.
Higher failure rates and lower margins, yet somehow these guys keep spending and inflating their budgets even more instead of actually refining their gameplay. Yeah. In contrast, Eastern studios are operating on a fraction of the cost, yet delivering polished, high-quality games that rival or surpass that of their Western counterparts. And I think the reasons for this are pretty straightforward. They have a focused design philosophy. Eastern studios are prioritizing gameplay first rather than overproduced cinematics and unnecessary bloat. Their teams are more efficient. They're not building massive bloated development teams that take years to onboard and years to manage. Their production is more disciplined without the need for endless games as a service monetization.
This is again what I was saying before about the studios that look like a Chuck E. Cheese.
Models, they're just focused on delivering a complete experience. And what's really scary for a lot of these Western publishers is that not only are these Eastern studios going to get better at their jobs, they're going to get more efficient over time. There's no denying that in some of these Eastern countries that they have lax labor laws that allow for faster, more demanding work cycles. It's not a good thing from an ethical standpoint, but it's an advantage when it comes to pure production output.
It is.
Beyond that, something else that works.
This is something people need to understand is that if other people are doing something and you think that it's unethical, you either need to do that unethical thing or you lose to them. Because the reason why cheating is against the rules is because it is effective. There is no form of cheating that isn't against the rules generally that isn't effective. So you either play on that level or you lose. I remember this was true with RBGs back in Cataclysm and Mists of Pandaria. Is like you had to have a proxy. You had to do this. You had people that were DDoSing constantly. You had people that were kickbotting constantly, people that were botting constantly. And like if you didn't have this, then you would lose. Now, I decided to just quit the game at that point because I thought it was weird, but a lot of other people didn't. And so like that's it. Even easier with screen peeking? Yeah, exactly. So integrity is optional? No, integrity is not optional. Integrity is guaranteed not to exist in the highest level of competitive economics. In any sort of extremely high stakes competition, you can guarantee that integrity will not be present.
Favor is that workplace culture in many of these Eastern studios rejects the Western industry's obsession with toxic positivity. Yeah. The idea that all work must be praised.
11 strategies for praising employee work without causing team resentment. I don't think this is a problematic, thing. But
criticism must be soft, and nobody can ever be called out for doing a bad job because in Eastern studios, criticism is direct and result-driven. If you mess up, you're told directly. There's no hand-holding, no excuses, no performative social media activism. Employees are expected to improve. Bad work doesn't just get a pass because it aligns with corporate social agendas. The game is
I think this part is true, too. I do, because like I feel like there's a big component where a lot of people can't take criticism. And I've always said this before, like I remember whenever I would raid lead or whatever, is that if somebody can't take criticism, I just kick them out of the raid. Just kick them out. Who cares? Like, get rid of them. There's no reason to tolerate a person like that. You can't deal with a person like that. If their ego is more important than the team's goals, then get them out. Now, if you're dealing with an employee, I think that there's a lot of tact and, personal... Like, and you guys can ask anybody that's ever dealt with me, like ever in the history of dealing with me, nobody's ever had a bad experience. And again, you can take that to the bank. Ask anyone, right? Like I could be aloof or unresponsive, but have I ever been rude or hostile to somebody? Literally never. Never. And again, ask anybody. But my point is that criticism is not an attack. And I think that the focus with a lot of people is that people get too personally invested into things and it becomes hard to criticize them because of that personal investment. And I think that's, again, like the narcissism. Like, I think that the West, and especially America, has a huge narcissism problem. And I think that narcissism problem manifests itself in the prevalence of gambling, actually. I think that the amount of people that are hyper-focused and hyper-fixated on gambling, one of the reasons why is because they think they're special. They think they're the ones that's going to make all the money and they're going to win. And so, like, that's really a massive, massive component. And I think that hinges on narcissism.
Is the priority. Personal beliefs and cultural narratives don't override the responsibility to deliver a great product. Compare this to the West, where some developers are spending more time policing their communities rather than making better games. You've got studios that are hiring based on ideological alignment rather than skill. Fearful of offending social media mobs and constantly engaging in PR firefighting.
Well, it's very obvious that this is the perspective, right? Like, you never see anybody in the gaming industry that's talking about, like, a lot of people in the gaming industry talk about politics and they talk about, like, political opinions, etc. But you never hear a single one of them say anything positive about Trump. And you could say, oh, well, that's because Trump's bad. But, okay, sure. But if you take a sample size of the population, 50%, 30, 40% actually, realistically, don't think Trump is bad. How is it that every single one of them over there thinks that? Well, I'll tell you why. It's because they're hiring and they're basing their interactions and their what's the word for it? Like the interactions, like their coordination and who they're dealing with, association with people that ideologically align with them. And anybody who doesn't ideologically align with them gets what do you call it? They get alienated. It's an echo chamber? Yeah, it's an echo chamber. Massive echo chamber. And so, like, how does that happen with, like, the video game industry? There's obviously, like, it's not like this happened naturally, because if it happened naturally, you'd probably see a spread that's similar to what the general population is. But no. Why is that? It's common sense.
Rather than focusing on making something great. Eastern developers don't have that problem. There's another huge advantage that these Chinese studios have in particular, and it's access to one of the largest gaming markets on the planet, while Western studios don't. Many Western AAA games don't release in China due to strict censorship laws or a lack of appeal to Chinese audiences. That artificially handicaps Western studios, while Chinese studios have no problem releasing their games both domestically and internationally. Look at Black Myth Wukong. 75% of its sales came from China alone, yet it still pulled in millions of Western players. Now imagine what happens when a Chinese studio makes a game that's even better, with higher global appeal, and also at less than half of the development cost of a Western AAA game. That's where things get really dangerous for Western developers.
Yeah, and also this is only going to multiply with AI. A lot of studios are already using AI as technology to enhance their games now. And, like, obviously a very, very light form of it is frame gen, right? Like, this is effectively like a degree of AI. And so the fact is that this is going to become more and more common. So as you have a regressive culture in America that is against AI, that hates AI, and they don't want to use AI, they're going to protest AI. And then you have China, let's say, or Japan or Korea, or anywhere else, really, that's using AI. And they're out, and if AI is better and it's producing higher quality results at a higher ratio in the free market, that product will win. And it will kill the product that does not take advantage of it. That's all there is to it. It doesn't matter what you can have whatever moral opinion you want on this, but at the end of the day, the biggest clothing manufacturers that are like Nike, Adidas, all of these places, as far as I know, their shoes aren't here being made in America, okay? And these are massive companies. You want to compete against that? You want to hire people in America and pay them the same wages? Go ahead. Have fun.
Developers aren't just a threat because they're making games that players want. They're a threat because they're only going to get better at it. They're going to get more experience. They're going to get more funding. They're going to learn from their mistakes. They're going to make games faster, and they're going to make them cheaper. Western studios can barely keep up as is, and they're already at a financial disadvantage. The fact that Eastern studios can produce high-quality games at a fraction of the cost and twice as fast is likely going to create an entire industry shakeup. If a Western studio needs $300 million in 6 years to make a game, but an Eastern studio can do it for $50 million and in half the time, who do you think is going to win in the long run?
Well, who would you want to invest in? Like, this is another component, right? Is like you have people that are investing in these companies. Like, if you're a company, and you're an individual even, right? Like, who do you want to invest in? You're going to want to invest in China. Goodbye, Western video games. Yeah, they are killing themselves. And they are. Like, it's undeniable that this is happening. And a lot of them will act like they're victims in this. And in some cases, they are victims in this. But it doesn't change the reality of what's happening. This is what's going to happen, and they're going to be out of a job, and they're not going to be able to get a job back.
You may see this as spelling doom for the industry as we know it. I see it as a rebirth and potentially the start of something greater. Bigger Western studios will be forced to do better, to be better. They'll have to be smarter with their spending, focus on the right things, and going back to paying attention to the audience and meeting the needs that aren't met. Sure, some studios are going to get caught in the undertow, but many studios are going to restructure and reprioritize, and with the rise of some of these Eastern studios, it's going to come new perspectives on how to make games, how to create new genres, and how to create customer satisfaction. You know, one of the things I brought up in my review...
I think that's very true, is that you will have Western studios that are able to adapt, but some of them that have been too infected with like these kinds of people will refuse to adapt, and they will end up destroying their entire studio. And, you know, that's all there is to it. That's just what's going to happen. Western will just buy Eastern studios. You can't do that in a lot of cases, right? I mean, like, it's like in some cases that's true. In some cases it's not. Western studios don't have the same efficiency as China. They can't compete. It's not just that. I think that as I said before, like with AI, I think that AI is going to be that next multiplier effect that's going to create a rift in between Western and Eastern game development. And I would say American and non-American game development. Again, like, it's going to create a rift because of the cultural ramifications that AI has here. And I think that the cultural ramifications that AI has, I don't think that average people give a shit. I don't think they care at all about AI. The average person doesn't care about somebody stealing their furry art on DeviantArt and then reselling it without the $15 commission. So you're not going, because I mean, really think about it. So let me get this straight. You think that the society that buys phones that are made from slaves and cobalt mines and clothes that are made from sweatshop workers that get locked inside their warehouse at night with nets in between the different floors so they don't kill themselves, you think this studio is now going to have enough empathy to care about you having your furry art stolen and then repurposed by AI? You think that's where they're going to draw the line? How retarded can you possibly be? Nobody cares about this. It's totally artificial and it's created by Twitter. Real average people don't care about AI. Twitter artists and virtue signalers on social media care about AI. So when these video games and this content hits a mainstream audience and the AI quality is better, it beats it. And that's it. That's the bottom line. And that's what matters. Would you advocate for banning games that moderate free speech inside of America? I don't know. It depends. Yeah, why are we talking about competition between game devs? People are going to buy games regardless? No, that's not true. People only have a select amount. We live in an attention economy. People will only buy a certain amount of video games a year, and they will only have a certain amount of money a year to buy video games with. So if certain games are a higher value and people feel like they are better games, those games will be prioritized. Of course. Wasn't Palworld made with AI too? No, they were completely unfounded lies.
Black Myth Wukong was how appreciative I was of being able to learn more about Chinese culture. A lot of people outside of China have little to no context on its legends, history, and mythology. Many Western audiences just have a surface level understanding at best. Vague concepts like the Great Wall, dynasties, and martial arts. Games have the power to change that. Black Myth Wukong wasn't just a game, it was a bridge. It introduced millions of players to a rich cultural history that they may have not have explored otherwise. This is where things get really interesting for me, because while exposure to new cultures through art can be a beautiful thing, China's gaming industry isn't just any industry. It operates under the watchful eye of its government. And that comes with baggage. No references to Taiwan, Tibet, Tiananmen Square, no sensitive religious or political imagery, no blood, suggestive themes, or excessive brutality. This isn't just speculation. Western companies have already censored themselves to stay in the Chinese market. Blizzard suspended a Hearthstone player for supporting the Hong Kong protests.
That was crazy. Like, I remember that happened. Oh, man, I remember that. I get your point, but in the sweatshop examples, there's a large degree of separation. People would argue that AI threatens more people, which increases in the possibility of having a negative impact with it. You actually think that AI threatens more people than people that worked in the textile industry? You really think there's more artists than textile workers?
Studios regularly edit their films to appease Chinese censorship. NBA teams scrambled to apologize after comments supporting Hong Kong went viral. Hell, there's a ton of things that you can't even say in Marvel Rivals in-game chat.
Yep, true.
I know a lot of people are going to have concerns about China's growing influence in the gaming industry. We're all aware of Chinese
censorship. Well, this is, as I said before, this is unironic soft power. In the same way that American people have the choice to buy video games that have censorship from the CCP in them, Chinese players also have the choice in a lot of cases to buy or not, maybe not Chinese, but like a lot of other countries have the choice to buy video games that have, American, gender politics in them. And so the problem is that these things just simply are not popular with a big group of people. And I think that inside of America, you live in an ecosystem where you can't criticize or bring up any sort of like question about this. But the issue is that in the rest of the world, the majority of the rest of the world, not only do they not care about this, but a lot of them actively dislike it. So when you go to the free market in a global market, people are going to care a lot less about not being able to type a word in chat than they are about a video game being designed in a way that feels like American HR is in the room. Like, one of them matters a lot more than the other. We are adjusting to their censorship. I agree. I think the censorship is problematic too. But at the end of the day, I disagree with it. And I think that players should voice concerns about it. And I think that players should expect and hold these games to a higher standard. And players should not tolerate being censored by, like, Chinese games. But at the end of the day, that's not my decision to make. I can't make anybody else carry my cross. That's something that I believe, but it's not something that I can make anybody else believe.
Propaganda and soft power strategies, so it's understandable to wonder whether gaming is going to face that same fate. But call me an idealist, I think that China's success in gaming might actually lead to a crack in that armor. We're already starting to see signs of that shift because Black Myth Wukong, while the game was toned down in China, in its Western release, it still featured intense action, blood effects, and darker themes. This suggests that Chinese developers, when targeting a global market, are prioritizing Western audiences' expectations over domestic restrictions. If they want games to...
Well, they're targeting... They're making the game, obviously, like, there's localization for every game. Like, I think the famous one that probably a lot of people here played WoW, you have like the little like tombstones in China rather than the skeletons because you're not allowed to show human bones and stuff like that.
Sell worldwide, they can't afford to be completely sanitized. The more success they find outside of China, the more likely these studios are to push back against censorship, or at the very least, create separate versions for those games to appeal to broader audiences. And this is what makes the future of Chinese gaming so fascinating to me, because as their industry grows internationally, the pressure to loosen creative restrictions is only going to increase. Right now, China's biggest weakness in this market is its own government-imposed limitations on creative expression. If their developers want to compete...
He's actually bringing up a really, really good point here, is that as these companies become more competitive, they will probably drop a lot of their restrictions. And I think that you're already seeing that. You saw that, like, I have two examples, right? I mean, obviously, like, Saudi Arabia has tried to make, efforts to be more liberal and to be more accepting so they can attract a more global audience of people to come there for tourism. And then the other example of that is HoYoverse. So HoYoverse used to be MiHoYo, and they rebranded in, I think, Singapore or something like that in order to, what do you call it? Money over everything. Yeah. That's the way it is, right? And so these companies will actually become more even-handed with this stuff as their popularity increases because they'll want to hit a broader and broader audience. That's it. Yeah, Singapore's popular proxy for Chinese company. Yeah. But, like, that's really what's happening.
Level, they have two choices: either ease censorship to stand alongside Western and Japanese studios, or remain shackled by their government oversight, preventing them from ever reaching their full potential.
Because this is also another component. I don't think that American players want to be censored by CCP propaganda. I think that American players do not like the idea that you can't say Tiananmen Square. Like, this is ridiculous to an American player. So I think what you're going to see, obviously, is that these games will just simply be localized in a way that don't have these restrictions for American players. And I think that's usually what's going to end up happening. And studios will do that because it's, again, if they can do that, why wouldn't they?
Concerns about censorship.
Nobody cares. It's not a big deal, but there are people that do care, and it does create negativity. And at the end of the day, people don't like being told what they can and can't say. I think this is a fundamental human behavior. And I do think that it will matter. And it's undeniable. Like, if you think about it, like, let's just use a little bit of logic here. Will it create more or less, like, if you have censorship in your game like that, Are you going to lose players by getting rid of it? Obviously not, right? So the only thing that you can do is gain players by getting rid of this. And that's why it would happen.
Influence and industry shifts, there's something undeniably exciting about what's happening. Gaming is evolving in a way that we never could have predicted. And at the center of it all, well, we're witnessing a genuine cultural shift. One that could reshape not only the industry, but the way that people from vastly different backgrounds engage with one another. People love to dismiss gaming as a pastime, but in reality, it's one of the fastest growing industries in the world. It's already overtaken movies, television, and music, and not just in revenue, but as a cultural influence. And with that influence comes power, the power to bridge gaps, to change perceptions, and to connect people in a way that no other medium can. This industry is changing, and as a result, we're going to get better games. We're going to get a lot more games. We're going to see new ideas, fresh perspectives, and experiences. And at the end of the day, that's all we've been asking for.
People are going to get better games in general. I think that's very true. He's right. And this is just going to keep getting more and more powerful. They may not lift censorship. China's going for a soft power approach to erode support for Taiwan's defense. Maybe that's true. It's hard to say, right? But the point that I'm making is that when this happens, and this is the case, you are going to have a lot of these games that are probably going to get rid of it, right? And I think that the MiHoYo or like the Saudi Arabia example are two good ones.
Wouldn't it be wild if gaming, not politics, not diplomacy, not think pieces from self-important journalists, was the thing that actually brought us all together?
Yeah.
A shared love for immersive worlds, incredible storytelling, and fantastic games. That was the thing that made us see eye to eye. If art, not ideology, was the thing that actually brought us together. Deep. I know. It's the last time that you guys are going to get anything positive from me for at least a few
months. Well, I think
months.
It's always been true, actually. I think gaming is one of the biggest uniting forces in the world. And I think that video games, and especially online multiplayer video games, have done more to erode xenophobia, racism, and other forms of bigotry than almost any other form of media ever has. And now, like, because if you're in a guild, everybody's been in a guild with people that are in different countries, and people get along. And like, even if you're playing with other people, so that's what happens. Music, that's a great point of view. Yeah, maybe music has done more, but I think video games on a personal level do, because you're having interactions with people in that other culture, right? Like if you talk to somebody that lives in, I don't know, Dubai, that's way different than hearing what it's like on the media. And when you make a personal connection with somebody like that, and I think this is especially true even inside of America, like, you know, you're playing with somebody that's like a black guy from, I don't know, some other state. And like, you know, if you grew up in like a place that's like maybe not as favorable to that, you would be able to just like have a conversation with this person and kind of ask the awkward or uncomfortable questions in some cases, and just have a shared purpose and a shared goal. And I think that, like, really in like an abstract sense, and I'm not making a comparison here, but this is just an analogy, is that in a lot of like World War II and World War I movies, one of the main like precedents for it, like I recently watched Fury with my dad with Brad Pitt. It was an insanely fucking good movie, such a good fucking movie. And a lot of these movies are built off of the idea of guys getting recruited from all around America to come together to accomplish a goal, right? And like that friction between, you know, the preacher religious guy and the nihilist Joe Bernthal character, that right there is the that's the essence of the narrative. And the fact that they come together and achieve something collectively is what makes those stories special. And I think that video games do that in a microcosmic way for individual people. You see what I'm kind of saying here? Like, and like that, again, I'm not saying like video games is like being in World War II, obviously, but it's just the same general idea. A band of brothers, yeah.
Starting now. See, this is the reason why I was so upset that these studios never got a fair shake from Western journalists. It bothered the hell out of me, because I viewed this as a reawakening. I viewed this as a second chance for the industry to get itself back on track, because I think that's exactly what we're going to see. We're going to see games going back to doing what they used to do before, which is connecting people, which is delivering an experience that customers are looking forward to.
Imagine games coming out
helping
and just being
us escape from the world and all of the bullshit that's around us. And honestly, there's so many good things that can come from this. I feel like I've only scratched the surface of some of it. if you think about it on a much broader scale, if you have all these companies that are out there, all these Eastern studios, especially if we're looking at like China and stuff like that, they're going to be able to make games faster, cheaper. We're probably going to get games cheaper because they're going to flood the market.
I believe that when I see it.
And if these games are good, that's even better.
Yeah.
Because if they're flooding the market with good games, what ends up happening is, well, supply goes up, demand is down.
Yeah.
The prices are going to have to come down to meet the demand. We're going to see less microtransactions or cheaper microtransactions, I would hope. We're going to see game prices.
Well, let's think about it like this. Stellar Blade doesn't have a lot of microtransactions. Black Myth Wukong doesn't have a lot of microtransactions. It seems like Phantom Blade Zero isn't going to have a lot of microtransactions. Many of these video games that are being released for Western AAA game development audiences don't have a lot of these. Yeah, Elden Ring doesn't have any. Metaphor ReFantasio doesn't have any. Grand Blue Fantasy Relink has a very minimal amount, and they're one time only, and they're not really game breaking. Like Hogwarts Legacy, yeah. So many of these games actually don't have that at all.
Prices fall a little bit. We're going to see some of these studios tighten their budgets, tighten their britches a little bit, and actually start spending money the right way on some of these games. There's a lot of good that can come from this. And the crazy thing is that we're only seeing the first wave of some of these games. They just announced the Tides of Annihilation. I wrote that one down.
That's the Final Fantasy 16
one. It just
came
out of nowhere. And I think we're probably going to see more of those come out this year, more of those random announcements. Oh, hey, by the way, here's
it's very obvious, and I heard this from somebody too, is that apparently the success of Black Myth Wukong really kind of woke a lot of people up in China, and they're like, okay, holy fuck, we actually can make a game that sells really well in America. We can actually make a global success level game. And so it basically like massively supercharged their gaming industry because they saw that it would actually work. It was basically one of the first times that a big Chinese game like that came to an American audience and succeeded. And this it's really the second time, I would say, honestly. The first time was Genshin Impact, one of the big ones there too. And I think Genshin Impact, think about how much that changed the industry by itself. And like after now Genshin, and think about how many Genshin Impact clones there are now, right? Games that function relatively the exact same.
Other game that looks wild out of nowhere with top tier quality. What is this? How does this even happen? And the next year is probably going to be even crazier. I'm blown away by it. Look at the sheer volume of Eastern games that just came out of nowhere last year, and then now they're doing it again this year.
Yeah.
And they're probably going to multiply it by next year. I wouldn't doubt it, especially because they've seen how much money these games can make. Black Myth Wukong brought in a ton of money.
Yeah.
Ton. Marvel Rivals is making a boatload of cash.
Yep.
Obviously, the gacha games that they have over there, MiHoYo is making a ton of money as well.
Yeah, that's
they see
making
the
a lot.
opportunity in it. They're going to invest in it, and by extension, we're just going to get more games and likely better games because they're going to see, oh, well, games of this scale, games of this quality are what actually, sell.
Yeah, so exactly. They sell. A lot of Chinese companies are restructuring, reducing expensive investments into Western studios and loading all that money into cheaper domestic developers. If you're talking about like that one leak that came out, that is just a leak and it's not really confirmed by anybody. But that being said, I do think that's true. Because like if I was China and I saw what the American development studios are doing, why the fuck would I want to put any money into that? It's obviously not making a lot of money. So why the hell would I do it?
We're going to go ahead and make. Oh, the players like this thing, we're going to go make that. Yeah. This kind of loops me back to this video that I'm planning on doing relatively soon about copycat games, where you're seeing some of these studios take premises or games that, well, other studios have that they may have not done a very good job with, or they haven't handled its success very well. Overwatch being a really good example of that. Yeah. I also think that Light of Motrium game is probably going to be relatively...
It's going to be like Horizon, but it'll probably be good because you can actually be in a mech, and it's basically Elden Ring. And yeah, I'm going to play the fuck out of that game. I cannot wait to play that game.
Disruptive. What if, just a what if scenario, the game that... Horizon's tried to come out so many times that it always ends up not doing very well, mostly because it always ends up dropping in the window of some major release right next to it or whatever it might be. I also just don't think people are really all that interested in Horizon. I don't really know why. I think the premise is really cool. Maybe it's just the character.
It's just fucking boring. I don't give a shit about it. It's like Avatar. Like the only reason why Avatar was good when it came out is because of the CGI. The CGI was like next level, right? But like the story of it was like so fucking cringe, just so boring. Like it like nobody cares about that. Like Horizon 1's all right. Nah, bro. Like this new game, like it's just gonna be way better.
Maybe it's PlayStation. I don't know what it is.
Alloy looks weird. Yeah, like and the main character does look weird. Like you don't lose anything when you make a character more attractive, but you do lose something when you make a character less attractive. Now, I don't think Alloy is like ugly or whatever, but they probably should have made her hotter. They absolutely should have. And I'll say that with any game, basically. Almost any game, making the female characters more attractive will be a net positive.
Like the players that like it, but on a broader scale, for a broader audience, the vast majority of people just aren't interested in that IP at all.
She's super ugly.
But then you have this Light of Motrium. Same premise. Just throw in some Elden Ring-esque fighting mechanics.
No. The boss fight they showed, I'm pretty sure every single, but it might have been one special mechanic, was straight lifted from the Fallen Star Beast in Elden Ring. Every single mechanic. It was. You go back and watch it. Now, for me, I think to myself, oh boy, 2 Elden Rings. Other people get mad about that, though.
And things like that. Throw in some mounts and whatnot. And players are going to eat it up. There's something to that. We'll be talking about that soon. Anyway, hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you guys did enjoy the video, like the video, subscribe to the channel, share it with your friends, share it on social media, spread my soft power and influence. Stay cool, stay righteous, stay safe. Catch you guys in the next one.
That was a really good video. Family. I think that a lot of people are downplaying the existential threat that these Eastern game development studios are putting on Western game development studios. Yeah, Chinese games are going to totally blow American games out of the fucking water, and I think that AI is only going to multiply this effect. A lot of people don't understand, I don't think, the power of AI and the amount of like strength that's going to have and how much that's going to change the ecosystem for these games. It's going to massively fucking change it. And so, yeah. And let's see, you say that, but some Saudi guy in chat's gonna set up a virtual machine. Maybe MBS is watching. Yeah, I don't know. But I just find this to be kind of funny because people can buy the game and refund within 2 hours. Please check out the Legendary Drops of Valve video. Yeah, I might at some point. Here, give the video a like. And I think that this entire topic with like these Chinese games and like the solution to a lot of the like Western weird video games like Veilguard is actually just buying other games from other places. It's not complaining to the devs and getting mad at the devs and, you know, making like, oh, I can't believe you would do this. This is so stupid. No, the real way you want to stop it, stop buying it. Stop giving them money. And if you stop giving them money, they won't exist for very long. And that's how it always happens. Why would somebody want to buy like some shitty new game? I think that Avowed is a great example of this. So like you have the demo for Mecha Break. And Amazing Season Games. This doesn't sound like an American company to me. Amazing Season Games. Let's find out where they're from. We'll go ahead and search Google for it. A developer. Where are they from? Let's see. Are they? Okay. All this gaming companies in China. There we go. Okay, so then 317,000 people playing the game. Even now, and by the way, the game received a lot of negative feedback. Even now, totally bodying Avowed. Avowed is never going to go above 19,000 players again. That was it. Today was the peak. Tomorrow, the decline begins. That seems botted. You really think that there's like not that? No, Mecha Break was really popular. People really liked Mecha Break. The first demo was great. It might peak again tomorrow. No, it won't. It's not. You think it's going to peak from a Sunday to a Monday? That never happens unless it's a brand new release, which it's not anymore. It's just not going to happen. But anyway, Monday's peak. Yeah, no, I'm telling you. Like, I mean, just if the game hits a higher player peak than this tomorrow, what's something that I can bet on it? That it's a good bet. I'm not going to shave my head. Make the apology video? I don't know for what. I mean, like, maybe I could make a, I could set a date for finishing Cyberpunk. Like, I don't know. Like, I'm trying to think like something better than that. If it beats this peak tomorrow, I will set a date for Skyrim. It probably won't be until after Monster Hunter, but I will set a date and I will meet that date within like 3 days. Like, give me like a 3-day window because something crazy could happen within one of those 3 days. So I might want to push it back or forward for a day. But, you know, I will give you a 3-day window. Is that fair? It's not going to happen. It never happens.